Welcome to Voices of Experience, brought to you by the Minnesota State Retiree Council, afl-cio. In the next half hour, we'll explore the state of the judiciary in Minnesota and discuss why there are storm clouds threatening the good weather in the state of Minnesota's court system. I'm Dan Mikel, President Emeritus of the Minnesota State Retiree Council, afl-cio, and I will serve as moderator for today's program. Joining us today to discuss the state of the judiciary is recently retired Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, Eric Magnuson. Welcome to our program.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Let's set the stage a bit. How does a person become a judge? Is he or she appointed or elected or a combination of the two?
There are basically two ways to become a judge in Minnesota. Far and away, the most common is that when there's a judicial vacancy, the governor fills it. Judges run on 6-year terms, and if you retire or quit during your term, then the governor puts in your replacement. It's only when you serve to the end of your term and don't seek re-election that the seat is open for election. About 90-95% of the judges are appointed by a governor because there's mandatory retirement at age 70, and that doesn't always fall in the middle or at the end of a term, and people get sick and make decisions about their lives.
And is there a difference between being appointed a district judge and being appointed an appellate judge, that is the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court?
Well, there's a statute that the governor's required to follow in appointing district court judges. He's required to consult with something called the Minnesota Commission on Judicial Selection, which is a 49-member commission made up of people across the state. They sit in groups of 13. I chaired it for a number of years. And for district court judges, their job is to have open nominations. Anybody who wants to put their hat in the ring can. The commission screens them. They interview 15 or 20 for each judicial position, and then make a recommendation of 3 to 5 to the governor, and he picks from those. For Court of Appeals judges and Supreme Court judges, the governor's not required to follow that process, but most governors have followed either the same process or something pretty similar to it.
Okay, but 90 to 95% of the time, judges are first appointed
right.
to a vacancy. When they get to the state of being elected, following their initial appointment, do they run as Republicans or as Democrats?
No, it's a nonpartisan seat. When the governor appoints you to a judicial position, district court, Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, you have to stand for election in the next general election that occurs more than a year after you take your office. So okay. It's 1 or 2 years before you're up for election, and you run in a nonpartisan ballot.
Okay. And how often would a person have an opponent in a nonpartisan election?
Well, it's kind of the higher you go up the food chain, the more likely you are to get someone shooting at you. There are, 4 Supreme Court justices up for election this fall. No, there are 3. 2 of them have opponents and 1 doesn't. There are half a dozen Court of Appeals judges up. I think 2 or 3 of them have opponents. There's a higher percentage of contested elections the further you go up in the judiciary.
But on the district judge level, it's
relatively few. There are a handful in each election cycle. And then, by far the most common election contests are when there's a vacancy.
Okay, yeah.
There's one in Dakota County now. There's one in Anoka County right now that I know of.
Why do so many people not vote for judges?
Well, I don't know about you, but when I get into the voting booth and I fill out the front page, for all the big offices, and then turn it over, because it seems to me that it's always the case the judges are on the back page. And I look at them, and even someone who knows as much about the judiciary as I do, I look at that and I say, I don't have any idea who these people are. And, citizens who want to learn about judges have a hard time getting any real concrete information about them. It's not because anybody's trying to keep it quiet. They're all public records. What they do is out there, but judges don't campaign a lot.
So there is a need for people to know more about judicial candidates.
Well, there's been a lot of talk, and I know we're going to get into this. There's been a lot of talk about moving to a different system of electing judges, something called retention elections, where judges get evaluated on the job they're doing, and they basically get a report card that goes out to the citizens who can then decide whether they think that judge should keep his or her job. We don't have that now. We do have a system of judicial evaluation, but it's internal. It's to help the judges be better at what they're doing. And when you think about it, a one-sided system wouldn't be very fair. If I'm a sitting judge and I get evaluated, but my opponent is not a sitting judge and he or she doesn't get evaluated, that's just one-sided and it doesn't work.
Yeah. But of the people who vote in an election right now, I happened to check the figures the other day, it's only 46% of the people who are actually voting for governor or president or senator who actually turn that page and vote on the other side.
You know, I have a lot of sympathy for people who think, you know, I don't want to vote if I don't know what I'm voting for. Yeah. On the other hand, you know, the overwhelming majority of incumbent judges get reelected, and you see incumbency on the ballot, and they may think there's just no point in voting.
Now, in our neighboring states of Wisconsin and Michigan, my home state, how has voting for judges changed in very recent years?
Well, it's not so much the voting that's changed, it's the campaigns that have changed. They have become very political and very expensive. You know, I don't recall the numbers in Michigan and Wisconsin, but for example, between 1990 and 1999, in the entire country for state Supreme Court races, about $75–80 million was spent. In 2010 or 2000 to 2010, it was well over $200 million has been spent.
More than doubled.
More than doubled, almost tripled. Yeah. And that's because interest groups have decided that they want to get their people in as judges, and they spend a lot of money to do it.
Yeah. I have a cousin who lives in Milwaukee. And, I only have 3 cousins, so it's very, very close to me. And I asked him about the elections there, and he said the commercials were awful.
The commercials
he said on both sides. He said on both sides.
Well, you know, think about it. We've got a government that's set up into 3 branches. 2 of those branches are political, and they should be political. You should be able to elect someone to the legislature who will pursue a program of social policy, governmental policy, tax policy that you believe in. That's how it works. You send your representatives and they hash it out. You should be able to elect a governor who has a political platform so he can balance or work with the legislature. But when it comes to a judge shouldn't have a platform. Every single judicial candidate should look just like every other one. I'll be fair, I'll be honest, I'll work hard, and I'll treat people with respect. But that doesn't make for very good politics. And so when you try to put the political campaigning in the judicial arena, it's just awful.
Yeah. So I've seen the political commercials from around the country, and I was thinking of the book that Sauk Center, Minnesota author Sinclair Lewis wrote in 1935, before I was born. He wrote a book, It Can't Happen Here, and he was talking about a different subject, but the title, It Can't Happen Here. Could a Wisconsin or Michigan-style judicial election happen in Minnesota?
Absolutely. You know, to say it can't happen here, I think, is to really be sticking your head in the sand. The leading case on politics in judicial elections is Republican Party of Minnesota versus White. That came out of Minnesota. So did all the subsequent litigation involving those issues, where they've had challenges to the restrictions that the Supreme Court has put on campaigning, basically, and fundraising of judicial candidates. That's come out of Minnesota, and the reason that's come out of here is that there's a strong group of people here who believe very passionately that judicial elections should be political. Well, if they become political, then it's going to be worse than Wisconsin, in Michigan, and Texas and Alabama. Those are just kind of the poster children.
So these threats are our storm clouds.
I think absolutely. One of the political parties decided this year that they would endorse judicial candidates. Although they're nonpartisan elections, that is, on the ballot, you're not listed as a Republican or a Democrat. To have a political party start endorsing judicial candidates gives them a political flavor that I think is really inappropriate.
Yeah. So we mentioned the White decision. I'm thinking of two other cases I'd like to have you comment on. The Keeperton decision of 2008 involving
West Virginia Supreme Court.
A West Virginia Supreme Court, where someone donated $3 million, or a person who headed up a group endorsed.
Well, it wasn't quite that blatant. There was a political action committee or something like that.
For the sake of the children.
Right, that spent $3 million advocating for the election of one judge on the Supreme Court and the defeat of another. And the strategy was a success. The new Chief Justice of the West Virginia Supreme Court was the guy who got the $3 million worth of help. And then the company that put all that money up showed up in front of him in a big case, Massey Coal and Mining.
Yeah.
And he didn't step down. He said, they didn't give the money to me. I didn't have any control over how they spent it, and so it's not going to affect my judgment in the case. And that went to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court said, even if we believe the judge that it really didn't affect him, it looks so bad that we can't let that happen.
It does not pass the smell test.
It does not pass the smell test.
Okay.
But when you start politicizing judicial elections, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah. Massey Coal Company, that's the same coal company that was involved in the mining disaster in 2010. Also, I want to mention the popular novelist John Grisham.
That's his book.
That's his book. The book is called The Appeal.
Right.
And it's in the book, and that book was printed before the actual Supreme Court decision.
Right.
But it was set, I think, in another southern state.
It was in a southern state.
Yeah,
I was reading that. I was on vacation just before I went on the Supreme Court, and I was reading that book, and I thought, well, that's just fantasy. That can't happen.
It can.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it can happen here.
Yeah.
It can happen here. Anyway, that's a very good book, available at the public library.
It is.
It's available in paperback now and so forth. Okay, the other big case came out of this year in January of 2010, the Citizens United case. Could you comment on that?
Sure. Citizens United overturned some real long-standing precedent of the United States Supreme Court and basically said corporations have a First Amendment constitutional right to contribute to political campaigns. Before that decision, the First Amendment was largely seen as applying just to people, individuals. You and I have First Amendment rights. Corporations don't have the same rights because corporations are artificial people. They're constructed by the law. Citizens United said, nope, we're going to treat everybody the same. And it answered the concern that this would open the floodgates for uncontrolled corporate spending in political campaigns by saying, well, there's nothing to say a state can't make you disclose who you've given money to if you're a corporation. That's the next battle. Now there are lawsuits saying that's a further infringement of the First Amendment rights of the corporations. Mm-hmm. But what it does is it injects a lot more money into politics.
Yeah.